Afternoon, everybody. It's Litsoc. It's Thursday. We welcome back Year 11 from their ordeal of mocks and everybody else. We had a break last week, but this week we are looking at Alice in Wonderland and all things Lewis Carroll. For reasons I cannot now remember.
It's his birthday tomorrow.
Oh, it's his birthday. Is it tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yes.
Same day as a certain other important event, of course.
Yes, I knew that there was a particular reason. I had the real pleasure last summer of staying for a week and studying at Christ Church College, Oxford, which is where Lewis Carroll was a lecturer and fellow in mathematics. And there is in the dining room, or the hall, I should say, which is also famous because of Harry Potter. There we are. And the staircase too, which is also featured in Harry Potter. There is a fabulous window which references Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
And also in the garden, two gardens, there are trees that also appear in the books. So very close to my heart. How many people have read Alice in Wonderland? Oh, quite a lot of you then.
Oh, brilliant.
Good. Seen the films?
There's been multiple films,
Multiple films, of course. It's been filmed and done drama series, hasn't it, over and over again, and continues to be a favourite. There was a wonderful exhibition at the V&A last year, I think, just after lockdown, it reopened. And they did a fabulous Mad Hatter's Tea Party with all sorts of china and graphics. It just was amazing. I am on the Alice in Wonderland net resources page at this moment, and we've got the two texts, Alice in Wonderland Through the Looking Glass, and we're also going to talk, Mr. Humphreys is going to talk about the long poem Hunting of the Snark.
Yeah.
One of the things we were just saying about Lewis Carroll is that he was a mathematician, but he loved telling stories. Alice was based on a real girl, Alice Liddell, and I suppose a bit like Christopher Robin, who we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. Perhaps this pursued her all her life, maybe.
Maybe.
And there are lots of famous characters, aren't there?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about, very briefly, one of my favourites, which is the Cheshire Cat. What do we know about the Cheshire Cat? Anybody? Tell me.
I used to be deathly scared of him.
You used to be deathly scared of him, okay. Why?
I was watching the fashion show and I saw like a video of it, and I was quite little and it absolutely terrified me.
Okay, all right. Well, he is quite terrifying, although he's the only character who listens to Alice rather than... and answers her questions, or at least sort of answers her questions, rather than simply doing their own thing,
Their own crazy
or
thing.
got their own epithets like "off with her head," asking the baby to be quiet, etc. The Cheshire Cat, of course, comes and goes. It comes and goes like real cats do, but of course this particular cat fades in and out of existence. A bit like Schrodinger's cat, I suppose. Is it there or isn't it?
There you go, there's maths.
And of course, the thing that lasts after he's gone is his grin. In one of the the Disney cartoon, he's striped occasionally, and in the Tenniel illustration, he is a tabby, but with this enormous grin. He's very big as well, so I can see why he might be terrifying. He's got green eyes as well. So there's our introduction to that. And also, of course, the other thing about Carroll is that he uses locations that he knew well and also real locations. So in Looking Glass Land, he uses a chessboard, and all the pieces eventually find out there are chess pieces, and they're actually moving within a landscape that actually is a bit like a chessboard, because it's full of canals and water, where quite near to Oxford, really bizarrely. So
Okay.
do you want to talk about Hunting of the Snark?
If you like.
Yes.
So, yeah, obviously he is very much most famous for these two works, and quite right too. But he did do other works. Now, I think if you think of what else he's done, what other people know that he's done, is the Jabberwocky might be something that springs to mind. But of course, that is in this. It's in Through the Looking Glass. So, but he did do other stuff, and he had a long and varied writing career. And the one that came after Alice in Wonderland was The Hunting of the Snark. And now this is every bit as nonsensical as the Alice books. Essentially, have any of you heard of it before I go into it? Has anyone heard of it? Or no? All right, this is one for the older students. Has anyone heard of the word Bandersnatch? Yeah, you know why I only ask the older students, right? Black Mirror. There's that episode, Bandersnatch, Black Mirror Bandersnatch. And essentially a Bandersnatch is a sort of lion-like creature, and it appears in The Hunting of the Snark. Now, the Snark is deliberately not described, and it's a sort of quest. It's a motley crew of people. I've written them all down. There's a bellman, there's a barrister, there's a broker, there's a billiard maker, a banker, a butcher, a baker, and a beaver. Odd one out, a beaver, an animal. There's also a maker of bonnets and hoods. So it's very alliterative. Now, we were talking about the language earlier, and Lewis Carroll's very fond of language, and you know the play on words and the meaning that we intuit from language, and that ties in with his logic. And so the story, such as it is they are on the hunt for the Bandersnatch. Sorry, not the Bandersnatch, the Snark. The Snark, my mistake. The hunt for the Snark, but they do encounter the Bandersnatch, along with the various other creatures on the way. And it's written in 6 fits that sort of outline the journey. I've got the first one here, which is basically just introducing us to the characters and the journey. And it's the bellman who creates the map to help them get to the land where the Snark is. But of course, the map, guess what the map is? It's a blank piece of paper. But yeah, they get there anyway, and you know, it's very similar to Alice, and yeah, it's a bit of a quest, and it all goes and it's all very circular, and there's no end game, and but it is wonderful, and I'll read you a bit of it. So it's a poem. It's a long poem. Miss Rio is going to talk about another one of his long poems. Briefly. I can only talk about this briefly as well, because there's only so much you can say, really. But here we go. Fit the first, the landing. Just the place for a Snark, the bellman cried, as he landed his crew with care, supporting each man on the top of the tide by a finger entwined in his hair. Just the place for a Snark, I have said it twice. That alone should encourage the crew. Just the place for the Snark, I have said it thrice. What I tell you 3 times is true. The crew is complete. It included a boots, a maker of bonnets and hoods, a barrister brought to arrange their disputes, and a broker to value their goods. A billiard maker whose skill was immense might perhaps have won more than his share, but a banker, engaged at enormous expense, had the whole of their cash in his care. There was also a beaver that paced on the deck, who would sit making lace in the bow, and had often, the bellman said, saved them from wreck, though none of the sailors knew how. There was one who was famed for the number of things he forgot when he entered the ship, his umbrella, his watch, all his jewels and rings, and the clothes he had brought for the trip. He had 42 boxes all carefully packed, with his name painted clearly on each. But since he admitted to mention the fact, they were all left behind on the beach. The loss of his clothes hardly mattered, because he had 7 coats on when he came, with three pairs of boots, but the worst of it was he had wholly forgotten his name. He would answer to "Hi," or to any loud cry, such as "Fry me," or "Fritter my wig," to "What you may call 'em," or "What was his name?" but especially "Thingamajig." While, for those who preferred a more forcible word, he had different names from these. His intimate friends called him Candle Ends, and his enemies Toasted Cheese. So yeah, you know, there's lovely rhyme scheme there. So what's it all about? Well, I don't know. I don't know what it's all about, but we were again before you all came in, we were saying, okay, well, you know, what is Alice in Wonderland about? Essentially, so yes, he was a mathematician, you know, and maths is all about right and wrong answers and logic and definitive fixed right and wrong. But Alice in Wonderland isn't like that. It's very, what's the word? Nebulous, thank you. Very nebulous. And it's sort of like the sort of intrinsic paradox of trying to impose that meaning on the world and trying to make sense of it as Alice is journeying through it, but not being able to because there's too much absurdity around her. It's almost like sort of existentialism before existentialism was the thing, you know, trying to impose meaning. But of course, it's also fun. It's also lovely. It's also, yes, it has its dark side. There is certainly dark, particularly in Through the Looking Glass, there's certainly dark things going on. But fundamentally, it's enjoyable. And I think it's a very important work, Alice in Wonderland, because, yes, as Miss Huntley said, it's from the Victorian era. And before it, Victorian stories for children were very didactic. They were very much, this is your lesson, children.
Twee, weren't they? Very twee.
Yes,
Yeah.
and this is your lesson, and you must learn it. And, you know, the closest example I can think to something as a forerunner to Alice in Wonderland is The Water Babies. You heard of The Water Babies, Charles Kingsley? Which is not as famous, certainly not now.
No.
But the basic story is a boy called Tom, and he has underwater adventures with the water babies after falling in. He's a chimney sweep, isn't he?
He's
I
a
think.
chimney sweep. So
And
he goes through a transformation. It's fantastical, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very fantastical. And, you know, so you can see some similarities, actually, you know, him falling in and getting with these water babies. But even that is, he learns lessons along the way. And not in a, you know, Gem and Scout way, into Kill a Mockingbird, in a sort of very heavy-handed, ham-fisted kind of way. In a very didactic, Victorian kind of way. So, yeah, so Alice in Wonderland, it sort of is a very important children's work for that reason. Just the love of story, the love of nonsense.
But very famous characters as well.
And also very famous characters. So who wants to talk about one of their favourites? We've had a Cheshire Cat.
And the Cheshire Cat. Anybody want to talk about their other favourite characters?
I can talk about the Mad Hatter. I came as the Mad Hatter for World Book Day.
You did, yeah.
So who likes the Mad Hatter? What do we think of the Mad Hatter?
Marianne, do you want to speak about the Mad Hatter? You going to come here? You going to stay there?
There's
Is it
not
right
really
to
much
stay
I
there?
can say about him. Well, he's definitely one of my, along with the Cheshire Cat. I love the Cheshire Cat. He's definitely my favourite. But I've got to say, Mad Hatter is definitely my second favourite, especially because in the film, especially through the Looking Glass, I love the Mad Hatter and the Looking Glass. But the Mad Hatter's always been kind of, I don't know. He's mad, and he kind of very much embraces that mad. Unlike the Cheshire Cat, who's very much, well, he also embraces the mad, but he seems to be the only one in Wonderland who can kind of understand the mad.
The Cheshire Cat's what we call enigmatic. He deliberately goes out of his way to be mysterious. Whereas the Mad Hatter,
he's kind of just a bit all over the place, but
Yes.
in a
Yeah.
way that works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's towards his madness.
exactly.
Yes.
Yes. Very good way of putting it.
Yeah.
He shows it off. He has the tea party.
Yes.
So that's a very famous scene, the tea
Yes.
party scene,
Yes.
when he presides over the madness.
And the riddle, Raven like a writing desk.
Yes.
There was never actually an answer to that. However, there was a typo. Well, not a typo, because Lewis Carroll deliberately put the answer in. Oh, I'm trying to remember. No, because it was Raven. And then the answer was, it was never or something, but then never was spelt with Nevar, so it was like Raven backwards, and it was all this nonsensical jumbledness of a kind of riddle. And when I read like what the riddle actually meant, I was like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. But now I can't actually remember, and it's so sad.
Well, I think he did mean it not to have an answer. Interestingly, any VAR almost sounds like never. You think of the Raven and Nevermore.
Nevermore.
There we go.
Yeah.
And then no, because the editors thought it was a typo, so they edited it out. So
really,
it
okay.
was always because I went to an exhibition on Alice in Wonderland. It might have been at the British Library. I can't actually remember. I was like 9 when I went to it,
Right.
but I remember reading that and I was like, it was I was flooded with knowledge that day.
I've got Lewis Carroll's actual answer that he gave written
Yes.
down here. Because it can produce a few notes, though they are very flat, and it is never put with the wrong end in front.
Yeah, never spell Nevar.
I see. Yes.
Well, of course, he might have just been
Word
messing
play.
with us. There might have actually not been an answer at all, and he just came out with that one later.
Anybody else?
I got a bit of trivia about Mad Hatters.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why he's called the Mad Hatter?
Go on, tell us, Miss Rio.
Because the chemical that they used to make top hats sent hatters mad. It had mercury in it, and
Mercury, yeah.
mercury, and they'd all get mercury poison, which affected your brain, and they all
Yes.
just
There you go.
just
Not
went
healthy
completely
at all.
mad. So it was a double play of words.
There's a lot of
There you
social context in both
Yes.
all his works. On
Yeah.
there. That
There was a bit there.
Yeah, that. By the time he wrote about the beavers must have been almost near extinction, and certainly in Britain anyway, because of the beaver hat. And the bellman, is he a sailor? Because I can't.
Well, the bellman's the nominal leader. That's
Yeah.
and he's the one who made the map and everything.
Because there's no actual profession.
No, this is it. Well, I suppose town criers.
Yes.
Hear ye, hear ye.
Yes, I suppose so. We don't normally call them that.
No.
It's-
Well, I suppose if you look at all the other professions, I mean, billiard makers, that might have been a thing then.
Oh yes, I mean
But-
much more so than him now.
Yeah.
I expect. Yeah.
But all the other professions, there's it. But a bellman, maybe that's the whole point.
Yes, guess so. Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, this isn't about the Mad Hatter,
Yes.
but I always like a rabbit.
Yes.
This one, sees.
So, when I was little, I was actually obsessed with rabbits since the day I was born, literally. So, I would used to leave these plastic carrots outside the door because I think a rabbit would come to collect them.
Right.
So, in the first World Book Day I had, I dressed up as the White Rabbit, and then I always liked him because he was like one of those people who need to know the time like all the time, and he was like, I'm late, I need to go, and then because he couldn't be late, and
Yes. That big watch. And he's beautifully dressed as well, isn't he?
yeah.
Very elegant
Very
jacket
dapper.
and waker. Yes. Yes. Complete contrast to Peter Rabbit, keep losing his jacket. Yeah. Oh, good. So have we gone off rabbits now?
Oh well, I still like rabbits. It's just
Yes. He is very elegant with his big long white ears as well, isn't he? Yes. Yeah. And he's enigmatic because we never know what he's late for, do we?
yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it delivering the tarts?
I thought it was the tea party.
Does he bring the tarts?
At the tea,
He was late to the tea
I would
party.
say I recall that.
I don't recall that. No, they might be.
That's all about the trial, the verdict
They all
before
wrote
the
it down on
sentence.
slates, yes. I think we were talking, weren't we, about how the characters sometimes live more than the plots. Because
Yes.
the plots, you've got to really got to know it well to remember the plot in detail. It's sort of episodic, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
And I guess also
Self-contained.
there's that element of dreamlike, but also there's a quest for
Yes.
knowledge, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely.
And she
Stories
takes
within
risks
stories.
all the time as well, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Seems to me.
Let's try drinking this.
Yes.
Let's try eating this mushroom.
Yes, absolutely.
Eat this side one to grow bigger, and that side to grow smaller, and let's fine tune it.
Yes, absolutely. I suppose on a positive note, it's experimentation, trying things. Safety aspect.
Yeah.
It's that sense of, and of course, it's the old. I suppose the worst thing about it is the cliche. It is all a dream in the end.
Yeah. So,
I hate it
and
now.
she wake up,
Yeah,
and it was that's that notorious ending. It's from this.
No, it's
The endings like that.
it might have been the first cliche.
Well,
Was it like wow?
But
that's
is it
It's
so
certainly
first
one of the
cliche?
better known
Was it a
ones.
cliche?
It's
One
hard
of
to know
the-
whether it was the very
Exactly.
first one, but
Yeah.
certainly is.
It becomes a cliche when people like
Overuse it.
yeah.
overuse it.
Do you know
That's
what we
right.
should have done? She woke up and then she woke up but she was in this I don't know, it was all a dream, but she was like somewhere different.
Mm-hmm.
That would be more interesting.
Well, through the Looking Glass.
Through the Looking Glass, yeah.
Have you all read Through the Looking Glass?
No.
Yeah, see,
so
that's-
there's a bit more. Okay.
Yeah, that's really sort of fantastical. As you go through Looking Glass, because you start speculating, what everything seems to be backwards, or is it the real life? It's the black kitten, isn't it? It is
Yeah.
the black kitten that starts it. Yes,
Oh yeah, there's
exactly.
the Alice in Wonderland, is it ballet, the Australian ballet, where the Queen of Hearts is like, she's like got this really cool costume.
Or was it like the metal robot one?
Yeah.
costumes. I mean, well, John Tenniel, who did the illustrations. Carroll actually was very specific in lots of ways about what everybody looked like. Obviously, there's more scope with Disney and Tim Burton's version as well. But it's still that, that the headband that Alice wears became known as an Alice band.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's been very, very influential culturally.
Oh, yeah.
Across the ages.
Definitely.
But wasn't it called an Alice band before the book?
No,
I don't think it
What
exists.
was it? How did it change? Like,
It's just the name it got.
it's just a name it got.
but how does the name, like, if you rename something, how does it, like, spread?
It
It's
just
like how we call Velcro and Hoovers Hoovers instead of vacuums.
Because Velcro is the branding, not the name of the thing.
it's just how people have used it. It just spreads by word of mouth. Nobody can really say why or how. It would have been called a hairband before, but because that picture became so famous, because the books have been bestsellers across the century.
Yeah, definitely.
It makes sense. Oriana, you talked about the flamingos, didn't you? On
Yeah.
the penguin.
To do with the croquet.
We all know what those are for. Yes.
Croquet, obviously. What else would you use it for?
Very useful, aren't they?
And it's interesting to think why he used flamingo, because they're certainly not part of the Oxford landscape. They're part of St James's Park landscape. They've got them there, but you wouldn't think, would you? I mean, it's not that you wouldn't look out your window and say, "Oh, look, there are the flamingos," because he wasn't in London.
You can use the pigeons as a.
I think flamingos are much more visually interesting.
Well, they
And
are,
also
yes. And
pigeons are
can
too
you
short to
use
say croquet with.
Yes, you couldn't use
Back.
pigeons for
Yeah.
They're too chunky.
croquet, could you?
Together.
No.
But the thing is, with a flamingo, you've also got that hook with the head that's useful for a mallet.
See, it's logic.
You wouldn't get
Logic.
Is that logic?
Lewis
Yes.
Carroll
Together
would be
and then another
would
pigeon at
love.
the end.
Is that
He would
logic?
love that we're talking about this right now.
Why wouldn't you use like a pelican or something with like a massive beak to just?
It's too big.
Yeah, it's also the art. You have, it's like a hockey stick. I think a flamingo is one of the birds that looks most like a hockey
A
stick.
flamingo is a hockey stick.
And the long legs.
And also, they don't have emus or ostriches, so you can't use those.
Ostriches are huge. They're too big.
Ostriches are too big.
They're impractical. You can't wheel those through.
And also, flamingos have like really skinny legs.
Yes.
What about
Yeah.
like a heron? Because they're more common in the UK.
Um,
but they have
Too
a
short.
similar. Like,
I suppose again it's the logic, Josie, because herons tend to be wild. I know flamingos are wild too, but they can remain in one place as they do in St James's Park or in zoos, for example. Herons tend to be wilder, and although there's a pond called Mercury in the middle of Christchurch Quad, and I expect they did have herons visiting it frequently because there are carp in it. You can see why it might be something that's a bit more static, not wild. Croquet is part of the games that they play at Oxford. Almost every college has a croquet lawn, so again, it's that. Yeah.
That's the life. That's the
Maybe
life.
they should
Oxford
just use
Dons.
fake flamingos instead of like
Well.
hooks.
Yeah.
It's
I've never
an
played
interesting thought, isn't it? It's that logic and the shape, and you can see him sort of thinking it through.
Visually appealing.
It's kind of
Yes,
cool.
visually appealing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you snap one of their legs off, it can still stand up.
Or still be used as a croquet mallet.
They're like intimidating. They've got like red eyes. They're quite scary.
Yeah, like if it breaks one of its legs, like if we break up one of our legs, we're just useless because we can barely even stand on one leg.
Uh,
I
So
tried
flamingos are
stand
used
on
to
my
staying
leg,
on one leg.
On like one leg, I could stand it 5 minutes, and that was like it. And but if they break their legs, they can still like work because they stand on one leg most of the time.
But then again, you do have to think of the upkeep of a flamingo croquet mallet? I mean, what do they eat? Is it algae or?
It's
Channel.
no, it's
Channel or
it's
something.
krill, isn't it?
Krill.
That
How much
think
krill
so,
is
yeah.
it?
that makes them pink.
They're just gonna have to have
Oh,
water
so it was
like
salmon.
around the thing, so like they can just bend over and
Mhm.
eat a bit. Like, as they play,
Yeah.
as people play.
See, it's all delightfully whimsical.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
just like
Just like
the
Is there a
stories.
story.
They could just go. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Just eat.
Did you get that, Miss
To
Rio?
the side.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The interesting thing also, I think, which we perhaps don't think about very much with Carroll, is that there are quite a lot of really strong female characters. Alice,
Yes, obviously.
who experiences it all. The Duchess, not exactly, your idea of a great friend. The Queens, the White and the Red Queen in Looking Glass, particularly, they're very different. But there's also a vast age range as well. He covers from very young to quite elderly, and that's also, I think, really interesting.
The Duchess.
Sorry,
Who's the Duchess?
the Duchess
Has a really
is.
large crying baby.
She's got the crying baby. Yes,
Oh,
who turns
yeah.
into a pig, doesn't it?
What?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
did like
It looks like a
they
pig,
did
so
like
then it turns.
a CBeebies version of Alice in
That's
Wonderland.
right. Yes. Yeah.
She's really annoying.
And doesn't the Duchess always going on about Pepper?
Yes.
Yes.
It's either too
Yes.
much or too little.
Yes. And then, of course, he uses familiar characters like Humpty Dumpty
Yes, Humpty Dumpty in Through the Looking Glass.
through the Looking Glass. So there's all that cultural sort of element for children also.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, when she speaks to Humpty Dumpty, he gives her sort of a way to sort of try to decipher the Jabberwocky, because at this point she's already heard the Jabberwocky, but of course it's like, well, I don't understand half the words of it, and then he tries to give her a translation before he inevitably falls. Because he's Humpty Dumpty, so of course he's going to fall.
Jabberwocky is interesting, isn't it? Because it's a poem that can be understood, and it works grammatically
Oh, yeah,
without
yeah.
actually.
It's got a cohesive narrative. of
Oh,
sorts.
yes, it has.
You know,
Yes. Yes.
we all know what it is. It's the young lad who goes to be a man, prove himself, and he slays the Jabberwocky and come to my arms, my beamish boy.
Beamish boy, yes, exactly. And
You-
that's another thing, isn't it? That has
That's-
entered
yeah.
the.
Oh yeah, the Jabberwocky,
Jabberwocky,
is certainly.
yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it's probably the best known thing outside of, even though it's within.
It's got this amazing start. 'Twas brillig and the slizy tove to gyre and gimble in the waves, or mimsy with the borogroves, and the mome wraths outgrabe. He uses verbs, he uses nouns, and it may not make any sense, but actually grammatically it works really well.
Yeah, the rhythm of it, the meter, again, it's just the language, the nonsense language.
Yeah,
It's-
exactly.
It's actually he hasn't just like thrown random words at the page.
No.
It's been carefully thought through.
Oh yeah.
And of course, that sort of thing is perfect to be read to by someone. I think Benedict Cumberbatch has read that. Brian Blessed has read that. Yeah, he's the best. He's the best to read that one. But yeah, that's definitely a good one to be read out loud. And it's a good performance piece. So
Yes.
definitely.
Because the Jubjub bird and the Bandersnatch, of course, he comes back to with Hunting the Snark as well,
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
he?
that's right.
Yes, exactly. So, although of course he, like Tolkien, he always had to add more in order to get people to understand, because people wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah, so Through the Looking Glass as well. That's got two of the more famous. Well, one and the same character. Two of the more famous characters. Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Yes.
Yes.
What do we make of Tweedledum and Tweedledee? What do we think of them as characters?
Kind of become an insult on its own.
Yes.
I didn't know
It has, hasn't it?
It has become an insult. Yes.
It's
So yeah, I mean, they've got their own chapter. There they are, look, with their hats and they almost look like little eggs, don't they?
Yes, I suppose
crammed inside little egg cups.
This is interesting because Tenniel worked for Punch for most of his life. Punch was a magazine that was humorous and satirical. In other words, it made fun of things. So you can see how he's making fun of schoolboys, and actually they're a lot older than the average schoolboy, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
So they got sort of stuck in their uniform, as it were. I have to say they're not my favourite character.
No.
They're quite unlikable.
Yeah.
Out of all the characters, I think Tweedledum and Tweedledee are quite, you know, it's just a kind of, I don't really want to read about you that much.
They get in the way.
But they are memorable.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason their names have been turned into insults.
To an insult. Oh yeah, well, I mean it's supposed to be not impressive.
No. People. It's the characters that she comes across as she's journeying through, trying to find an answer to where she is,
Yeah.
and why she's there.
An answer that's forever out of reach.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So, Miss Rio, do you want to come and talk about
Sure, I'll give a brief little.
a brief?
I did read it, but that doesn't really help massively.
Little recurring pattern here.
Yeah. So I read the poem Phantasmagoria earlier. It's a long poem. It's like 20, 30 pages or something like that. And it's in a similar vein to Alice in Wonderland, where it's about a man who hears a noise in his house, I think. I think this is what it's about. Hears a noise in his house at night, and there's sort of a little ghost in the hallway of his house, and it's sneezing because it's caught cold because his house is too cold. It's all just a bit, yeah. And then basically it's just a long, rhyming narrative poem about him talking to this ghost, and the ghost tells him everything about how to be a ghost and what they do and all the different types of ghosts, and they're all just a bit weird and silly, and it's the same kind of, there's a ghost that he said is like 22 stone and sits on you if you've eaten too heavy a dinner at night, is like your punishment for eating cheese before bed or something, all these kinds of,
Okay.
the ghosts have like, functions and things like that. It was very ridiculous and quite fun. But what I quite liked about it, in a similar way to what Alice in Wonderland does, it kind of reframes your idea of the ghost. Because obviously in the Victorian times they were obsessed with ghosts and things like that. And it was all very serious and, kind of had a rigid structure of how to be a ghost and what a ghost was like. And this is kind of, it is a ghost in name, but not in the way that it's like, spook with his shoot on. It's just like he's a funny little guy that's just in his house, and he's a ghost, and that's what we do, and we all just come to different houses and eat your food and drink drink your drinks. And
So again, more playful, right?
it was kind of playful, it
Yeah.
was silly. I don't know, I can't remember, I didn't check if it came out before or after Alice in Wonderland, but it's just that similar vein of just whimsical and silly, but with a bit of a moral message as well. It kind of had a bit of that.
Yeah, I could,
Morality
like,
tale.
don't eat cheese before bed, otherwise a 22
Yeah.
stone ghost will sit on you.
Yeah, like, it was little things like that, and you're reading it and you think, I think that's what I've just read, I'm not entirely sure. But and then at the end the ghost goes through all the different stages of what you do when you're a ghost and how to be a ghost. There's a bit where he says about how to get into a house. You like smear the walls and the floor with grease so you can get in really easily. You just get these kind of really weird images of ghosts. But then he finds out he's in the wrong house. He's meant to be in, the main character is Mr. Tibbets or something, and he's meant to be in the house of Mr. Tibbs. And he gets really annoyed because he's wasted all the haunting time, and he's told him all his secrets, and he's not even someone he was supposed to haunt.
That's
kind
very
of
funny.
Yeah, you should read it. It was quite fun. I mean, it makes very little sense. I will say that. Like, you have to kind of read.
It does on a certain level.
It
I'd
does on
say.
a it was more so than the Jabberwocky,
Yeah.
which
Well, no,
makes
that's
it
got a
does
story
make
too.
sense. Yeah, true. The Jabberwocky is one of those ones where technically it makes no sense, but you still kind of know. You still know what the story is. You know what he's trying to say.
And,
This was
yeah.
a little bit less obscure than that, but yeah, it was just funny and silly, and yeah, it's an interesting take on hauntings and Victorian ghost stories and things like that. So yeah.
It's really interesting when you think of Carroll and his influence,
Mm,
and then what else has come out of the Oxford
yeah,
academia.
Mm.
and the time period as well.
Yeah,
Like what? Yeah.
I mean, Carroll did it first, basically. And
Very
and
innovative.
Still
Mm.
influence to this day.
Mm.
I mean, there are are some aspects of all fantasy literature. I can't imagine being the same without Carroll. I think there's also, because he's coming from out a completely different discipline, not obviously fantasy, although you're thinking esoterically, aren't you, as well? You've got maths problems, so you're thinking about the abstract, trying to make sense of it, and applying it or not applying it to the real world.
Which is and chess features in Through the Looking Glass in particular. So, and remember Walter Tevis, the Queen's Gambit.
Yes.
Well, some of you, only a few of you were there for that one, and how that uses a framing device to sort of reflect Beth's journey and character development. So in this one, it's sort of almost like a sort of means for which Alice can try to use abstract logic to get her way through the world, but it is still also very abstract at the same time. So there's only so much tangible stuff she can grab onto, and it's the same with the croquet game. And well, actually, there's in the first one is also the human chess, the people chess game, of course. Cards. Let's not forget the playing cards. So the Queen. You're talking about strong female characters. What do you make of the Queen of Hearts? She's probably one memorable character we haven't really talked too much about. I mean, we haven't actually talked about the films yet either, and how all these characters are depicted in the films. Think of has anyone seen the Tim Burton film?
Yeah.
Which one's that?
That's the one with Johnny Depp as the Mad Hatter and Helena Bonham Carter as the...
They must be quite old now, those.
Probably about 10, 15 years old.
Yeah, it's probably, we think it's new, but
I was like,
It's
that's
right,
the
okay,
new
so it's
one,
not- it's
but it's
not-
not the new
that
one.
new.
It's not the new one.
Maybe it's time for another version then.
Yeah.
But the Queen of Hearts is, she's a bit mad, right? She is a strong character. And also the King of Hearts, and they sort of...
Oh, yeah.
Their interplay, their dynamic is an interesting one, especially when it comes to the trial, how the king sort of presides over it.
It's 13 years old.
13.
13 years old, okay, so a little bit old now. Did you want to say something?
So I don't get, if you paint roses, you'd be able to tell that they're painted.
Well,
I
yeah,
think-
but
I think it
it's
depends,
Wonderland,
though.
so you don't know how it works
there.
there.
Trompe l'oeil, which is where it's painted in 3D, so it looks really real.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, talk about that.
And also about transformation as well. So.
Yeah, but they can't have been perfect painters.
They might have just been desperate for them to be red. Any kind of red.
And maybe she wasn't looking at them very close up, just from a distance.
No, but she's the Queen of
Maybe.
Hearts. She's like, I need all my roses perfect.
That's true.
Yes, true.
I think there was like a movie that I watched, and at the end, that there's supposed to be like another movie coming out, which is the one after it. And at the end, they have like painted red roses with a bucket of paint next to it.
Okay.
And most people and since one of the characters in that movie was Alice's daughter, they think that the next movie will involve something of Alice.
What
Okay.
film was that?
It was like at the end of a Descendants movie for some weird reason, but like an animated one.
Which one?
It was one of the animated movies.
That's Disney, isn't it?
Yeah,
interesting.
which I thought was kind of weird.
The
The next
like
one's
the
coming out.
animated Shorts, or?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know which one it was.
Do you know lots about Descendants?
Yeah, I love Descendants.
Yeah, I think the new one, there's a Descendants 4 coming out in. It's supposed
Isn't
to
there
be
already
this
In
year,
the,
September,
know.
like
yeah.
August, like sort of time.
Well, that would be
They
interesting.
had like animated
Yeah.
short episodes, and they had the Mad Hatter. They had Alice's daughter. in
Yeah.
that one.
And they had like loads of Disney characters' daughters, like Rapunzel's daughter, whose hair left 10 minutes after she did.
Oh.
It was really odd.
Well, that would be interesting to see if it's
Yeah.
Disney, how they do it now,
Yeah.
a modern version, because obviously the Alice in Wonderland Disney is so
Yeah.
famous now. You know, the version of Alice from that, I think, is now the version of Alice people think of, right? So that would be
Yeah.
interesting to see how different it is. Miss Huntley, did you want your seat back? So I'm
Yes,
gonna
I
have
will,
to
because...
Oh, Mr. Ray,
run off
if you
it.
have to go, do you
I
want
might
to
have to run off, yeah.
Right.
can you just very quickly tell us about that thing you told me earlier,
Oh, yeah.
the syndrome?
I'll just sit back here.
All right.
So I was reading about Lewis Carroll, obviously not his real name, but and they speculate that maybe he suffered with migraines, and there's a type of migraine that you get which your depth perception can change, and you see things like a basketball will look huge or tiny, and they think maybe that was something that he experienced, and it's called Alice in Wonderland syndrome, based off maybe that's why he wrote the storyline of her changing in size, and maybe there's obviously it's speculation because there's only so much you can know with old records, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
There's a lot of a lot of the madness in his book is based a lot of like actual reality, you know, it's kind of grounded, isn't it? It's kind of interesting.
And there's also, I mean, you've got hallucinations, you've got fever, and of course that sort of thing was much more prevalent then because they just didn't have they didn't have the drugs, they didn't have, you know, you couldn't just,
especially for children as
take,
well.
you couldn't take Calpol, you couldn't take
and then they had the drugs.
Yes.
Everyone was taking morphine for the
because for pain,
because they didn't know it was
we didn't know
as bad as we know about, you know, there's things we didn't know.
No, that's right. It was nobody knew the problems.
The children's cough medicine that just had.
Yes.
Didn't original Coca-Cola have like a ton of cocaine in it?
That's why it's called
Coca-Cola. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to bring us to a quick end because we need to say goodbye to Crystal, who's been a really loyal member this year. Thank you very much, and we hope that your journey home is nice and that you love being at home again. We're going to miss you, but we hope that you will keep watching us on video. On YouTube.
We'll try to say hello to you.
Yeah, we'll try to say
we'll
hello.
greet you.
I suppose we ought to say hello to Mr. Conway.
Oh, hello, Mr. Conway.
Hello, Mr. Conway.
Who's Mr. Conway?
He was an English teacher a while ago now.
Oh,
He taught
you around
piano
it?
in year
He
7.
taught me for year 7 and then he left.
And year 8 too, wasn't it? Did we do year 8 as well?
No.
No.
You were with me for year
I was with you for year 8. That's
and year
right.
9.
So, so we wish you all the best, Crystal, and enjoy your reading.
Yeah.
And thank you for being you. And being here. So
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah. And do keep in touch. If you come back to the country, come and see us. We'd love to see you. Okay. So I'm going to end it there for today. Thank you for everybody's contributions on Alice in Wonderland, and you know, it's worth going back to the books, like we found with Edward Bear and Winnie the Pooh. There's always more to discover, and I'm going to finish off with a nod to Mr. Gibbons. The Hunting the Snark, the Lewis series, the detective series. There is a whole episode where the Hunting of the Snark is part of the sort of subplot, and it drives poor Inspector Lewis mad because he can't. Well, what does it mean? Does it mean anything? No, says Hathaway. It means nothing, and they're all going round pursuing clues endlessly. Bye, Miss Rio. So it gets everywhere. Oxford and Lewis Carroll. So thank you, everybody. Next week.
I don't know what we're doing next week yet.
Well, we don't know what we're doing next week yet, but we'll let you know anyway.
Yeah, we'll email you just like we did this week.
Yeah. Okay. Good
All
to
right,
see you,
so
everybody. Thank you.
Keep
Bye,
reading.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.